how do we feel about the concept of collecting something that its predecessor is maybe just an objectively better version of?
It is likely that people will have nostalgic feelings for it. Is it worth it to get ahead of the curve and start collecting now? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Podcast. I'm your host, Murph, as always, with my good friend, Cal.
Hello, Murph. I'm here, brain fried. I've been gaming all day, so let's talk about some more video games.
Yeah, but haven't you been gaming with Magic the Gathering?
I don't want to talk about it. What are we talking about today, Murph?
No Magic the Gathering on this podcast, only video games. So today we're going to be talking about the Nintendo Switch. So if you have been living under a rock, recently the Nintendo Switch 2 just got unveiled. People know that it exists. Nintendo has said, yes, this is a thing. It exists. Here's renders of it. And they have basically confirmed that the Switch 2 will be, I don't want to say 100%, but they have confirmed that it will be backwards compatible with the Switch 1. And so we kind of wanted to look back on the legacy of the first Switch, kind of its library, what it's all about. Like, this is a video game console that's, I don't know if it has by this point, but has basically matched the PlayStation 2 as far as popularity. Like, the Switch has been a stupid popular console, right?
Extremely popular. I just want to note really quick, Murph, they said that, like, for the Switch 2, the compatibility might be a little bit weird. My feeling for that is, like, Ring Fit is not going to be backwards compatible with the Switch 2, you know, like
sure.
that kind of stuff. But I digress. Yeah, this console has been stupid popular. I think it's been a console that they've been able to really successfully, like, sell households multiples of, because it's not only a home console, it's also a portable console, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the Switch has been nothing but an unmitigated success for Nintendo. And I got to say, it does feel a little bit weird to talk about this console as, like,
Past tense,
a retro
right?
console, because it's, as far as life cycles of consoles go, it's been around for a long time. It released in March of 2017. That is closer to a decade old than not. We're coming up on, what, year 8? It'll be year 8 now.
Yeah. 2025 is when we're recording this.
2025 in a few short months. Probably well before the Switch 2 comes out, it will have turned 8 years old. By the time the Switch 2 comes out, it may very well be an 8.5 years old or what have you. It's a very long time for a console to be around.
Yeah, because, like, the 3DS realistically, like, came out in 2011 and kind of more or less was dead by 2018. So that was 7 years. And boy, did the 3DS feel old
the 3DS,
by the time it got to that point.
The 3DS felt like it was around for a really long time. And the 3DS went through several evolutions. You know, there was the original 3DS. Then you got the redesign, the 3DS XL, the new 3DS, the new 3DS XL. You know, there was kind of like waves of the 3DS. And for the Switch, you know, we got the obvious child-proof, a little bit smaller Switch Lite. We got the Switch OLED, which was exactly the same, but got the better screen. There was the quiet refresh of the console, which pretty much just gave it significantly better battery life, but that wasn't a huge amount of fanfare for that. But
yeah, it's basically been the Switch that you can go in and buy now is kind of the same that you could buy on day one.
Yep. Your options are, the Switch you buy now will have better battery life than the Switch you bought on day one. And you have, like, the premium option of buying one with a better screen if you so wish. And it is a very beautiful screen. I gotta say, I do love my Switch OLED screen, but it's a lot to have not changed in 8 years. Murph, I want to ask you, as we close the curtain on the Nintendo Switch, something that, you know, if you want to, like, I don't know how we define retro or whatever. We can say a generation behind is retro video game, maybe, or over 8 years old is a retro video game. No,
who cares? We have branded ourselves as a video game collecting podcast.
Yes,
does not have to be retro.
I know,
even though we do love retro.
I always think of it as retro video game collecting podcast, but we are a video game collecting podcast in a video game podcast. Heck, we enjoyed the Switch. What about it did we like or dislike? I know we are both pretty big Nintendo guys.
Oh, yeah. I love Nintendo.
And the Switch has obviously been the Nintendo console. It's not like we've had the 3DS around or another portable option or whatever, like was the case for so long. The Switch has been the Nintendo console for the last 7 3/4, almost 8 years. How have we felt about it? Murph, you can go first. I know we both have thoughts. Registered trademark.
Yeah, it has been very cool to see the Switch like actually be successful coming off of the Wii U, because I'm sure you remember the Wii U generation. It was
bad.
Depressing. It was bad. It was really depressing. There were lots of good games, but the overall opinion of it, the overall sales numbers of it, the thought about it from Nintendo, like Nintendo really didn't do a good job selling the gamepad idea. They didn't have great ideas for making games for it or anything. Like, it just overall felt like a failure. And it was financially. So being able to see Nintendo take their Nintendo cool ideas and put it together in a console that like works and resonates with people, I think has been really fun to see.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me happy. When Nintendo is successful, I think that is good overall. That means we get more cool Nintendo stuff. So I've had my Switch since day one, and I haven't changed it. I bought a day one Switch. I stood in line at Best Buy. That Best Buy no longer exists. That's how long it's been. And I have liked it decent amounts. I was really impressed with the idea, because like I don't know about you. Did you have a Wii U, Cal?
I did not have a Wii U. No, I did not.
Coming off of the Wii U, there were so many things that I wished it did, like the gamepad. I was like, oh, well, I can play off TV, but I wish I could take this with me. Like, you can't even really take it to the bathroom, otherwise it loses connection. You can't take it to my bedroom, which was in a upstairs, completely other room, otherwise it would lose connection. So I was like, oh, how cool would it be if I could have it and play it in my bed? Or even better, I could potentially take this and play it elsewhere. How cool would that be? And Nintendo listened and made that a reality. And not only that, but the cool factor of the Joy-Cons, where you could like take them off and all of a sudden, wow, 2-player gameplay. Like, it's its own all-in-one video game console. You don't need anything else beyond this. And you can have fun multiplayer gaming sessions, as well as like actual home console games on the go. And I've been wanting home console games on the go for so long. That's always been something that has really appealed to me. And Nintendo gave it to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I used my Switch pretty heavily early on. I bought Breath of the Wild with it because, of course, that was like the only good thing. And I enjoyed Breath of the Wild quite a bit. I never beat it. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but
you
I only
got to where you could do the final. Oh, you got about halfway through. Gotcha.
I got about halfway through, and then I was like, okay, I've had enough of this game. Like, I've enjoyed what I've played, but I don't need more of it. I'll come back to it later. Ended up not doing that. But I do think that, again, Breath of the Wild is a good game, and basically everybody under the sun agrees that it is a good game. So, yeah, I played that. And then after that, that's when my problems with the Switch started to become more apparent. Because, like, I bought Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, obviously, because I thought, oh, well, it's Mario Kart 8, which I already have for the Wii U, but I can take it anywhere. And so I did. I bought it. And then I bought like Hyrule Warriors because I love Hyrule Warriors. I'm like, well, this is a game that I already like and I can take it anywhere. And I kept running into that where I would say, hey, here's this game that I already have. I could buy it again. But I started noticing that I wasn't really playing this thing in handheld mode all that much. Even though that seemed like such a huge appeal to me at the beginning. Like, that was a huge promise of like, hey, you could take this anywhere. Realistically, I just wasn't doing that, especially not as much as I thought I would. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a be careful what you wish for. Not exactly that, because like I did get it and I did like it. I just didn't use it for what I thought I would use it, if that makes sense. So that's kind of been my relationship with the Switch, is that I thought I was going to use it a lot and then ended up not, and then kind of have only used it for like the Nintendo exclusive stuff.
Yep, sure. Well, I had a lot of the very same like positive first impressions and thoughts about the Switch as you did. Like, you know, that first trailer when they're showing the guy playing Breath of the Wild on his TV in his house, and you're like, whoa, yeah, new Legend of Zelda game, cool. And then he like walks over to the walks over to the entertainment center, whatever you want to call it, and he picks up the Switch from the dock, and it immediately switches over to the Switch, and immediately he's just playing it on handheld mode instead. It like blew my brain because, like you were saying, it was rumored that's what it was going to be. That it wasn't exactly a secret. That's what Nintendo was probably going to do for their next console, and they had kind of started moving that way a little bit in the Wii U direction, like you said. Handheld had always been so much of Nintendo's bread and butter ever since, the Game Boy. And especially the 3DS was also an extremely successful console for them. So was the DS proper. Obviously the Game Boy, all of the handheld stuff was extremely popular, very successful for Nintendo. Everything except for the Game Boy Advance Micro, of course. But
what a cute little device, though. Mm-hmm. I still want one. I want one so bad.
Too. They're so expensive, dude. They're so expensive now. I should have known when I was 10 years old. I should have bought them on clearance at Walmart, but I didn't because I was 10 years old.
It's not quite the "hey, I was in third grade, why weren't you buying a house?" type of situation.
But it's maybe a little more realistic.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you were 10, why weren't you buying a Game Boy Micro? It's like, well, technically I could have, but I had the same problem then of like, well, it just doesn't do enough for what I want.
But unlike you, the Switch has basically been everything that I could have imagined. I use it heavily. I have used it heavily, both consoleized and handheld. The kind of, I would say, the golden years of the Switch did also happen to coincide at the time when I started traveling a lot. There was a period of 2 years or so when after the COVID lockdowns, when I was traveling a lot to a lot of Magic events like 2022, 2023, I was on a plane low key, like half of the weekends of a year. And for that period of time, the Switch was awesome for that. Just pull it out on the plane, play it on the plane. I could take my video games with me everywhere that I went. It was a really good JRPG machine for me because there were so many JRPGs on it. Obviously, I played all of the original Nintendo stuff. Unlike you, because I did not have a Wii U, it was a great platform for me to then get to go back in Nintendo history 4 years and experience many of the Wii U games that I missed out on because I didn't have a Wii U. All the HD ports, all that stuff got ported over, and I got to try those games that I had not played before for the first time. That was a really fun experience.
They're all still like legitimately good games.
Yeah, they're good games. They just, no one played them. Except
they
for
were just
Murph.
On Wii U.
No one played them except for Murph.
And like Scott the Woz.
And yeah, exactly. And something that we have talked about a little bit in the past, and maybe we could talk about a little bit right now. For me, practically day to day, it was effectively a portable console because for whatever reason, I can tell you why. Because I am a guy who does a lot of freelance writing and related. I basically have my laptop with me at all times. Everywhere I go, I take my laptop, I take a book. I am a backpack guy. I am a backpack daily carrier on average. If I'm going somewhere, I'm taking my backpack with me. And it is just that easy for me to slide my Switch into its little case and toss that into my backpack too. And then it is portable for me. Like, it's much bigger than a 3DS, a PSP Go, a lot of the stuff that's actually pocket size. It's not a pocket size console, but for me, it was still an easily portable console because it can go in its case and it can go in my backpack, which I always have on me. Right. And then in that case, I did end up playing it out and about more than I would then like just on the plane. Cause I'm at the coffee shop, especially when I was working the 9 to 5, go to the coffee shop, remote worker, go to the coffee shop with my laptop, work for 2 hours. I don't really want to go home yet, but I want to take a break from work. Boom, take out my Switch, play my Switch for 20 minutes, go back to working. Like that was something I did a lot too. Like the portability of the Switch has been and has remained a really big deal for me because it's portable enough that with the way I already live my life, I can take it everywhere with me. And that means I do incidentally play it here for this amount, play it there for that amount, take it on the plane because I traveled a lot for a while, all that kind of stuff really added up. And when I'm really into a Switch game, it is really nice for me to like, if I'm going up to bed, but I'm not quite done gaming, but I want to be in bed, but I'm not, I don't want to be in the basement anymore, which is pretty far away from my bed. I can pick up the Switch, take it to bed, play my Switch for another 20 minutes. That's something I have added up tons of hours onto.
It's like when you say, I'm going to go to bed, but actually you're just on your phone for like another hour.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that, but I'm doing it with the Switch instead of my phone, right?
Yeah.
So all of those things have added up for me. But I will say, we'll talk more about the games a little bit, I think, about the Switch. But at the end of the day, I think even for me, it kind of ended up being like an indie game machine, which I am an indie game fiend. I play every major indie game that comes out because a lot of what's popular in indie game design is very popular with me in my house, in my head. But yeah, the is Nintendo game machine. We'll talk about that a little more later though, but beginning to end, I have loved the Switch, though the last year and a half, especially once a PS5 entered my home, I have started to feel the age of the console a little bit.
Cal, just so you know, the PS5 came out 4.5 years ago.
Well,
Almost.
I didn't get a PS5 until like 2.5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Because I could say, like, get my hands on one for less than $700 for a very long time.
So true. Stupid scalpers. Hey, when that happens, when a new thing comes out, it's probably going to happen with the Switch 2 as well.
Yeah.
But alas, that's just how it goes sometimes.
I know the port. I would imagine a reason why you didn't use it as much, Worf, was number one, you like travel less than I do. But number two, the actual form factor of the Switch, while it is much smaller than, say, even a Steam Deck now, which is like the other major portable competitor we have, you don't take a backpack everywhere. It doesn't fit in your pocket.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Switch hardware at large.
Sure.
Like at the top of the show, you mentioned that there's basically three. There's the OG Switch, there's the Lite, and then there's the OLED Switch. And so just at its core, the original Switch, it has the screen on it. It's not the OLED screen. You can detach the Joy-Cons, play it in handheld mode, dock mode, and it's not huge, like you said. It is smaller than like a Steam Deck.
Yep.
You obviously can't fit it in a pocket. Like I have tried like taking the two Joy-Cons out and then try to put the screen in one pocket. Just nope, it's still way too big for that.
Yep.
My issue with the Switch and why I didn't take it anywhere was because, well, what would I take it anywhere for? Like, if I'm going over to somebody's house and we're like, yeah, we're going to play some Super Smash Brothers, like I'll grab a backpack, grab the Switch, grab some controllers. And if they have a dock, then I don't have to bring anything else beyond that. Mm-hmm. But because of that, it's like, well, if I'm going to bring the Switch somewhere, I have to also bring a backpack somewhere. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it is a very good like airplane machine. I definitely agree with you on that. I think that's one of the places where it shines kind of the most because there's a lot of downtime in airports. Mm-hmm. But other than that, just in a normal day to day, like I'm not taking that thing anywhere. I'm just not.
You aren't taking it to work and playing it on lunch, Murph?
No, I tried doing that a while ago, like when it first came out, and it was just like, well, I have to leave it in my car, or I have to like pick the thing up and then take it somewhere and store it somewhere, and it ended up becoming so much of a hassle. I just stopped doing it. It's fair. Like it's bigger than a book. It's bigger than most books.
Yep, definitely.
So
hey, you just need to wear really big cargo pants everywhere and get a Switch Lite and put your Switch Lite into the cargo pants. Thoughts?
Yeah, so the Switch Lite is honestly one of my biggest disappointments for the Switch because I thought that the Lite would solve a lot of the issues of the Switch. And it kind of does. Like, I don't love the Switch D-pad, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's 4 buttons. It does the really cool thing where you can take that and it's 2 controllers when you split it up.
And it's the face buttons for the purpose of when they're 2 controllers. Yep.
And it's great for that. But if you actually want to use it as a D-pad, blows. The thing sucks. Yep. Because you don't have like a place where you can rest your fingers in the middle and then like rock your finger around or anything. They are 4 bespoke buttons that you have to individually press. So I didn't love that. And it kind of warded me away from like 2D games as a result. And so the Switch Lite comes out and it's like, hey, here's a smaller device. It doesn't have the detachable Joy-Cons, but it has a proper D-pad. And still pretty decent battery life. Screen's still good. It's kind of like everything that I was looking for, except you can't dock it.
Yep.
And that just killed it for me because I'm like,
Yeah.
Oh, this thing's so close to being incredible. And even now, like I have never purchased a Switch Lite. I've kind of always had that on the edge of my mind of like I kind of want to, but I'm not actually going to use it.
It doesn't do the thing.
Yeah. And because the way that the Switch infrastructure works is that the save games don't save on the cartridge. They save on the internal system, whether or not you buy a cartridge or digitally. You can't really like switch back and forth between switches, ironically enough, that well. You have to like say, all right, I'm going to upload this thing to the cloud, upload my saves, and then move over to here and then download my saves and everything like that. And so it's just too much of a hassle for it to be like, hey, I'll use the Switch Lite when I go elsewhere, and then I'll use the original Switch at home.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. I do wonder how much like the price point of the Switch Lite would have had to change if it had docking capability or what they may have had to do. Because, it doesn't like fit super well into the dock. So maybe they would have had to make a Switch Lite dock or...
I would have been fine with that. I would have paid $300 for, which is the price of a regular Switch, for the Switch Lite if it could also dock.
Well, I think the kicker is the point of the Switch Lite was to make as cheap of a Switch as possible and as indestructible of a Switch as possible so they could give it to little kids.
Yeah. I understand why they made it.
I know.
Yeah, I understand what they did with it, but yeah. And similarly, that's why I didn't end up getting the OLED Switches, because it was like, great, the dock has an Ethernet port and the screen is better. And I'm like, well, I don't really use the screen that much anyway, so am I going to pay $350 for it? Probably not.
In the same vein, I like jumped for the OLED because I still had a launch Switch and I was trying to get the battery life upgrade plus the better screen because, like I said, I would say I like 60% use my Switch handheld or whatever compared to...
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I would say I use it like maybe 5% handheld. Like I very rarely take that thing out of its dock for playing purposes.
I think low key another thing that has ended up with me playing the Switch handheld more is that there is another person who lives in my house who competes for television time. And that's has ended up with me like if my wife Jen wants to use the TV for one reason or another, I can just pop my Switch out and then use it handheld and I can still game while she's, maybe playing Baldur's Gate on the TV or watching something or, what have you. So that adds up too. But
yeah, that makes a lot of sense because like the Wii U was also good for that. And the Switch, I ended up not really having to compete much with people for it. So I guess like I would be lucky in that regard. But yeah, I can see that as a positive. I just never really used it for
definitely. That. And I think that is like one of the small downfalls. Well, I guess for you major, for me small. One of the main complaints that I've heard from people about the Switch and that I do understand but do not empathize with because I love the Switch the way that it is that like, yeah, if you don't use it handheld much, what you get out of it is a much weaker home console to play some of your favorite game series on. Some of your favorite game series are locked into a much worse piece of hardware compared to what there could be, even by Nintendo standards.
Yeah, it's like a slightly cleaned up Wii U 2.
Yeah,
it's kind of what the Switch is if you don't use it for its portable mode of any sort. I guess nowadays, if you were to buy a Switch, I guess kind of no matter what, OLED is just the best way to go.
Yeah, it's like more expensive. So if you want to get a Switch for cheap, yeah. But okay, we've talked about this for a minute. Let's move on a little bit. I think there's maybe like one major problem the Switch has had beyond, I didn't think it was portable enough. I don't use it portable, so maybe it's a little weak.
Yeah, that's more like lifestyle things on our end. And like, yeah, I don't use it as much as I could. But I still think it's a good overall device, but it is hampered by the Joy-Cons.
Yep. The Joy-Cons have, I would say, maybe a litany of issues. They're really cool ideas, but they're fragile. They can kind of break easily. I think they did less of a good job as being like an independent controller as they could be. Their size, strangely. A lot of my opinions on like the way the Joy-Cons are made are influenced by the fact that I am a 6'4" guy with big hands. They're not me sized. I know I'm not an average person in that regard by any means. But there was, of course, the problem of Joy-Con drift, which, if you are unfamiliar, over time, the sensor inside the graphite pad that these Joy-Con stick uses for sensing where like the stick is and how much it's moving and all that kind of stuff, it could quite literally wear down over time, which could cause your, they call it drift because like over time your Joy-Con would just be like have a very subtle like left input all of the time when you have it at center, or very similar, or maybe a very extreme right input or whatever when it's at center and all that kind of stuff, which could make for it not working well as a controller. Murph, did you ever struggle with Joy-Con drift? Is that something that ever happened to you?
No. Honestly, as far as technical issues, maybe it's due to the lack of actual use, but I haven't really had any issues with it at all. Like, it's still the same console. And I replaced the Joy-Cons once because I had like a bunch of like sticking buttons, and I was like, I'll take this apart and fix it myself. And I stripped the screws, and I was like, well, I don't care. I'm just going to buy another set of Joy-Cons.
Yeah, that's very, very fair.
They are difficult to repair even for somebody that's like, I have a pretty decent knowledge of how to take controllers apart and work on them, but I don't really want to touch the Joy-Cons as far as the tiny pieces that are in there. They're more akin to like working on handhelds than working on like an actual video game controller, home console controller, that is.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Have you had any drift issues or like hardware technical issues?
I had some stick drift on like one of my Joy-Cons on my launch Switch, on year 4 or whatever. I started having some problems after some pretty extensive use. And if I recall correctly, I was just able to get it fixed for free. I feel like through Nintendo, they kind of extended some of the warranty after a point, and, and I got that problem fixed, but, I eventually never really had to worry about it because I did kind of move on from using the stock Joy-Cons all that much as the world of third-party Joy-Con replacements kind of opened up, and, I could get my hands on a Hori Split Pad Pro and have a Switch with controllers on it that are actually the size of my hands and have a more comfortable experience using it.
Is that what you use now?
Yeah, handheld. I used the Hori Split Pad Pro for a while. I was using some different brand that had like rumble built in, but the rumble was like so loud and obnoxious. Eventually, I just stopped using it and going back to the Hori Split Pad. And then when I am playing it, just like sitting down and playing it, I just use the Pro controller.
Same. I just use the Pro controller. Sometimes I'll use the Joy-Cons because one thing that I legitimately like about the Joy-Cons is the fact that they are not attached. I know that the Switch will come with like this little plastic piece where you can slide the little Joy-Cons in, and then it has like the grip for as if it were an actual controller. But I kind of like not using that. Like, I love just laying down under a blanket, arms at my sides, Joy-Con in each hand, and playing like that.
Yep.
I still use the Pro controller most of the time, but sometimes if I'm just like I want to be as comfy as possible, then Joy-Cons sometimes come out. And same with like on the plane or something, I will take the Joy-Cons out, rest the system itself on the tray table, and then play with my hands down.
Yep, definitely. That is one of the things about the Joy-Cons that I did always really like. You can just have your hands wherever you want. Just like, my left hand comfortably goes here, my right hand comfortably goes here. Yeah, why not?
I've met some people that actively don't like it because they feel like it's not solid enough, and they're like, it feels too weird, and it's like they're not connected. Well, because obviously they're not connected, but yeah, I just have to disagree with those people. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I always really enjoyed it. That was something I always really remember from one of the early... well, I don't even remember what YouTuber it was, but it was a relatively larger individual who was really into the Switch and was just like, it finally allows us fat gamers to play as God intended. It was like with like an Xbox controller up like real tight, and then he had the Joy-Con Joy-Cons, and he was just like down here, just like It always makes me laugh every time I think about it. But
Yeah, it is nice. And one thing I do like about the Joy-Cons is I don't have to worry about them ever being charged because I keep my Switch docked constantly. And as long as the Joy-Cons are attached to the console, which I don't have anywhere else to put them, I only have the single pair, so why the heck not? I just always leave them connected. So that aspect I do like about the Joy-Con. But I know the drift issue has been a problem for so many people for so long. It is hard to call these things. Are they good? Are they good controllers? They're okay.
So I don't think they're good controllers. I've never liked the Joy-Con. That has been like the downfall of the Switch for me personally, is that like for me the default controller experience kind of stinks. They're small for me, but even like the thumbsticks aren't great. I don't really use the D-pad for anything, me personally, but it's non-existent. There's not a D-pad.
The D-pad
There's 4 buttons.
Sucks.
It's like the N64 C buttons. That's what we've got going on here for some reason.
That's actually a very good comparison. But yeah, the analog stick, that's also a good point because it doesn't have as much like travel as a normal analog stick. It just doesn't go quite as far. It feels like as if you had like a 3DS circle pad and a full-on analog joystick and was like right in between that. And that's what the Joy-Cons feel like.
Yep, definitely. And I think one of the most annoying things for me is because like since they are like pretty, I guess like on paper, pretty technically impressive, they have remained very expensive for the entirety of the console's life. And that is kind of why I have never really had... I've had at most like 2 pairs of Joy-Cons at any one time because like I got my original pair, and then when they made a special edition Skyward Sword ones, I love Skyward Sword a lot. I like Legend of Zelda, and I said I'd buy some Legend of Zelda Joy-Cons. And so then I had
the collector in you. That's the collector in you.
And then I had 2 pairs of Joy-Cons, but just like every time I'm like, oh yeah, it'd be kind of nice to have another pair of Joy-Cons around, taking the Switch to Christmas. People like to play Mario Kart. I could have another pair of Joy-Cons around, just make it that much easier. And then I'm like, $70. They're on sale for $60.
No, they're $80.
$80. Okay, yeah.
The Pro controller is $70.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, even worse. $80. No, thank you. And I pass. It's just like it's a lot of money.
I'm weird because I prioritized buying multiple Switch Pro controllers. Like I have a single set of Joy-Cons and 4 Pro controllers. Why? Because I leave it docked all the time, and it's just very nice to be able to say, hey, we're going to play Mario Kart 8. Here, you get a full controller. Here, you get a full controller, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, because one weird quirk before we move on that I didn't know about the Switch until we ran into this problem is that each Joy-Con, it sounds obvious when I say it, but each Joy-Con is its own, it has its own sensor, and so needs its own connection.
Oh, yeah, and like its own individual Bluetooth connection.
Exactly. So you cannot have more than 4 pairs of Joy-Cons connected at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Because each pair of Joy-Cons takes up 2 slots. So if you want to play like the Smash Ultimate or something like that, you can't have 8 pairs of Joy-Cons. So it doesn't come up that often. There's just not really actually that many games that you need more than 4 players, but that is another reason why I like having the Pro controllers, is because it just gives you a lot more flexibility when you're playing these multiplayer games.
And I do wonder if that's also why they would, for so long, were also like a little bit gamey about letting people, as annoying as it was and still is, they were so cagey about letting people just like connect their own Bluetooth headphones and all that kind of stuff to the Switch for so long. Can you even do that? You can now. But I do wonder if they were real cagey and weird about that for a while, because that may take up a good amount of Bluetooth bandwidth, and people like try to connect 2 headsets and 2 sets of Joy-Con controllers to it, and they're suddenly having problems, and they're like, oh, why doesn't it work? Well, it's just like beyond the Bluetooth capabilities of the Switch, It is something interesting to consider, but
it is nice that you can plug in like basically whatever USB controller you want, and it normally just works.
Yep.
But as far as like wireless stuff, the wireless stuff with the Switch has always been a little bit funky.
Yep. I've had weird range problems with like my leg getting in between like my Joy-Con and the dock, and I'm 6 feet away and suddenly it gets spotty and I'm like, what's going on? That's happened to me before. But Murph, I wanna ask you. We've spent a lot of time already talking about like the hardware of the Switch. We haven't even gotten onto the games yet. We'll get into the games here in a second, but we've talked a lot about the hardware of the Switch, the OG, like the 1.5, whatever you want to call the new battery, the higher, the underclocked higher battery version, the Lite, the OLED. The different controllers, they've made a lot of Joy-Cons. There's different Pro controllers. There are a couple different special edition Switches, less than I kind of ever thought there would be, or less than I ever hoped there would be, I would say, I guess. There are some really fun ones too. The Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch is probably one of my favorite looking consoles that has ever been made.
Yeah, I know that one's a favorite of many people.
It's just so cute. They did a really good job with it. But how do we feel about collecting Switch hardware if the Switch 2 is just a better version of the Switch? Do you think, like, I know that it might be weird to like ping the question over to you because you're probably someone who's never going to collect for the Switch regardless, and neither am I, but how do we feel about the concept of collecting something that its predecessor is maybe theoretically just an objectively better version of?
It is weird because I think the Switch 2, again, this is pure speculation until the thing actually comes out, we get our hands on it. But I do think that the Switch 2 is going to effectively replace the first Switch model. Like, I think the first Switch model just has enough problems with the Joy-Con, the OS itself, which is snappy enough, it's fine, but like the store is so slow. It's like, it lags so much, takes forever to load things. I believe I read somewhere that it's literally just a web page that it accesses.
Yep.
So if the Switch 2 can fix these problems, again, this is just speculation because we don't know for sure if it'll fix these problems, but it will just be a better version at a hardware level. At the very least, it will have more powerful hardware, meaning that the games themselves will run better. And so aside from like any other compatibility stuff, it will just be a better experience overall.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. I am kind of looking forward to stuff like playing Breath of the Wild at like a rock solid, 60
30
FPS or whatever.
No, it's kept at 30, so I don't think that the Switch 2 is going to
it up on the Switch 2. No,
that'd be super sick because like Xbox does like this thing where it increases the frame rate of certain specific games. It would be so cool.
Like locked in the past.
Yeah. It would be so cool if the Switch 2 could do that as well. I'm not expecting that, and I am just expecting it to be able to run these games at 30 frames per second, but consistently. I care more about consistency than overall if it is able to hit 60 at some point, but other times it's at the 40, and I'd probably rather have a rock solid 30 at that point, kind of no matter what. So as long as it delivers that, I think it will provide a better experience for people. So as far as like collecting it, I don't know if that's something that you should realistically do as far as like the hardware. That is, again, we're talking specifically about hardware. Unless things actually get really cheap, because that is a strong possibility in that this thing has sold insane numbers of consoles. And so especially in the used market, I think these things are going to get very cheap.
Yeah, sure. Because there's so many of them. Yeah.
There's so many of them out there. People will be upgrading and not really have a need for their old Switch. So I think it might be a fun time to pick up one if you haven't picked up one before. Or if you're like, I've been kind of wanting to try out that Switch Lite model, which that I believe is the boat that I'm in, where I might pick one up.
Yeah, you very well might just pick up a Switch Lite if you can get one for cheap enough. Yeah.
Yeah, if it hits like the $100 range, like, yeah, I will pull the trigger for this thing that is just a for fun purchase. Like that is for fun money. And yeah, because like the Joy-Cons aren't going to be able to be carried over into the new Switch. I'm interested to see if the Switch Pro controllers will carry over.
I would hope so. It's unless the controller scheme is drastically different, but from what we've seen, it isn't. So
yeah, because I legitimately like the Pro controller quite a bit.
One of my favorite controllers of all time, I would go so far as to say.
Yeah, like the buttons are nice and meaty. Like they're big buttons. They have like a good. They're not too clicky, not too squishy. The analog sticks both feel good. I wish they had analog triggers, but the regular Switch doesn't. So the games weren't really going to be built with that in mind. That's fine. It still has like it's got the gyro inside of them, so it basically mimics all of the functionality that you need for like 99% of games, all in that.
And the and it is, as far as rechargeable controllers go, you were talking about how much you dislike rechargeable controllers compared to actual batteries that you don't have to worry about. The Pro Controller lasts for a real long time.
Yeah, it's not as much as like the Wii U Pro Controller where that thing lasts for like 80 hours, but this thing will last a decent while.
Yep.
And it's a lot less finicky to charge than like the PS5 controller. At least for me and for the devices that I have. So the one thing that I don't like about it, other than like obviously that I wish I had analog triggers, I wish the D-pad was better. Like, come on, Nintendo. You invented the D-pad, and your main console in its stock configuration doesn't have one, and your Pro Controller screws it up because the D-pad doesn't rest on like a little ball bearing, which all Nintendo's D-pads used to. So you can just literally put your thumb in the middle of the D-pad, press down, and it'll press down all 4 directions at once. You shouldn't be able to do that with a D-pad. You should have to like roll your finger around or your thumb around and press the buttons one at a time. Your thumb will obviously rest on the D-pad, but it causes like just a few too many like incorrect inputs for my liking, where I press right on the D-pad and then down is also pressed at the same time. Or I press up and then left is also pressed at the same time. It doesn't happen often. It happens just enough for it to be like mildly annoying.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I hope it's backwards compatible. That'd be real nice. I'm going to tell you what, Murph. Yeah. I don't think anyone our age, probably, unless they're really in love with the Switch, will end up collecting for the Switch. You know who I think will maybe end up collecting stuff for the Switch?
Who?
People who have been of an age to build a nice nostalgic relationship with the Switch, Murph. I am a man who obsessively collects a console that was followed by a console that was quite literally a GameCube that could do more things. Maybe it had a little bit less personality or whatever you want to say about it, but the Nintendo Wii was a GameCube that could also play new games and had cool new controllers and all that kind of stuff. And like we've talked about in the past, if you want to accessibly get into GameCube gaming, the best way to do so is to find a cheap launch model Wii, because it is cheaper than a GameCube and it plays the GameCube games and you can also play Wii games on it.
If you think about it, the Switch 2 is to the Switch, but the Wii is to the GameCube, basically.
There's a lot of similarities that could be drawn there, right? So I have a feeling that, there's a lot of stuff when it comes to collecting all that kind of stuff that isn't logical. Sure, a lot of people could look at me and they would say, man, why would you collect all the GameCube stuff when you could have the Wii? It's a better GameCube. Sure, it is. I don't have a lot of deep down fuzzy nostalgic feelings about the Wii as much as I do the GameCube. Plus, there's way more cool special editions of the GameCube, so that helps. But I have a feeling that when/if we do see like a generation of Switch collectors or whatever, it very well may be someone who was, 6 years old when the Switch came out and was really excited to get one and was able to get one when they got a Switch Lite when they were 9. And, maybe when they were 14, they got a normal Switch because they were still, the Switch was still the only Nintendo console by the time they were that old. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But because it is likely that people will have nostalgic feelings for it and will be collecting for it, is it worth it to get ahead of the curve and start collecting now?
And then selling it to them.
It's a legitimate question. Okay.
Murph, we've been going for so long and we haven't even talked about the games.
All right.
Maybe we should talk about the games.
Let's talk about the games. So, the Switch library is interesting because I'm going to come out right now and say it. I think it is both the Switch's greatest strength and its greatest weakness simultaneously. Now, what do I mean by that? So, the Switch has a great library if you look at it in isolation. There's so many excellent titles that exist out there in the world. Like there's 2 excellent Zelda games. There's Mario Odyssey, 3D Worlds. There's like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. There's like Donkey Kong Country Returns HD that just came out. You got a port of Skyward Sword. There's a cool Kirby game. You got Metroid. You got all this representation of great Nintendo stuff and a ton of great third-party representation as well. There's all sorts of like remasters and collections that find their way to the Switch. Like all the Sonic games that have come out also come out on the Switch. There's like an Assassin's Creed collection, like the Ezio collection and the 3 remake that exists on the Switch if you like that. So it does a very good job with games that are like Xbox 360-ish level of complexity, and you can play them there. What the Switch also does is attempts to punch above its weight in some areas. So like there are games that have no business existing on this console, but they do anyway. Like The Witcher 3. You can play The Witcher 3 in its entirety on the Nintendo Switch.
Hey,
which is insane.
My wife did it. She played the vast majority of Witcher 3 on her Switch Lite, and she loved every second of it. It's one of her favorite games, and the majority of it she just played on the Switch Lite.
That's crazy.
It runs quite decently for what it could be.
Yeah, I think it all depends on whether you look at this console as a handheld mostly that's sometimes a home console, or a home console mostly that's sometimes a handheld. Because if you look at it in the latter light, it kind of falls short in many areas. But if you look at it as a handheld, like when you play The Witcher 3 in handheld mode, the flaws are a lot less obvious.
Yeah.
Because you're playing on a smaller screen, and it's going to look a lot better, that lower resolution. You're willing to make a lot more sacrifices to get it portably.
Definitely.
It just makes the library very interesting to me.
Yeah, the Nintendo Switch, hardware-wise, capability-wise, for the games it could play, it was old hardware when it released almost 8 years ago.
It's mobile hardware. That's one thing that Nintendo's always been good at, is they take old hardware, put a cool spin on it, and then say, here you go, people. And the Switch is that.
Yep, exactly. And so that did really limit the capabilities of what they were able to do. Was it really awesome that some last gen and even like then current gen stuff, people were able to make it work on the Switch technically, like The Witcher 3, Doom Eternal, all that kind of stuff have ports which you can play those games on the Switch and they'll run at a decent frame rate. They'll look a little muddy sometimes, but they will run and you can play those games on the Switch if you want to. I think punching above its weight, especially early on in the console's lifetime, is a really great way to put it. I think over time, that kind of stuff dropped off as like the newer games that were being released into the AAA space. There was just like no way to make it work at all. Because like even when we're talking about Doom 2016 and Witcher 3 and even a little bit Doom Eternal, we're talking about like PS4 games or like that generation of game being ported. We're past that now. The games that we have now are a little bit more intensive than that kind of stuff, and I think that's where the hardware started to feel a little long in the tooth, is that like past the point you couldn't really actually put modern AAA games onto the thing anymore.
Yeah, because when you look at the Switch hardware like holistically, it is a marginally more powerful Wii U. Obviously the architecture is very different, but as far as like overall power levels, it's a little bit more powerful than the Wii U. Like it runs Breath of the Wild a little bit better. A lot of these ports from the Wii U to the Switch run ever so slightly better. Like it's not a ton. And the Wii U was basically on par with like the 360 PS3. And so it would make sense that you could get something from like the PS4 era. You got to scale it down quite a bit, but you could get there. You're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices, but you can get there. But yeah, like you said, a lot of the games coming out now, you just can't do that. And so you have to make your own custom version for the Switch.
And so a lot of the games that are desirable on the Switch, we have already mentioned it a little bit, were obviously the Nintendo exclusive games. Nintendo consoles, I mean, it's no surprise for a while now. Like, if anything, it was kind of a cool bonus that the Switch was getting some of these like modern-ish AAA games ported over to the console, because almost even since like the mid GameCube era, it has been a bonus, if anything, if we get a lot of big third-party titles on Nintendo consoles, just from the horsepower perspective. They're expensive. They take a lot of horsepower, all that kind of stuff. So the draw kind of always has been, and especially on the Switch. It's the Nintendo exclusive game. What was your favorite Nintendo exclusive game on the Switch?
Easily Mario Odyssey. Like, as much as I love Legend of Zelda, talked about this extensively in the past, Breath of the Wild is not my favorite Zelda game. It's a good game, but definitely not my favorite on the Switch. Mario Odyssey, I think, just does such a good job at being a fun, creative platformer that just throws so many ideas at the wall, and like being able to the movement with the cap and just the movement in general in that game is so good, so fluid, so fun to do like advanced techniques. It's one of those games where it has a very low barrier to entry. Like, you can get in and start playing, but if you're good at the game, you can have a ton of fun at that game. And it's just so fun to see high level people playing it. It's like, I'm not amazing at the game, but I still have plenty of fun. It's just so well designed. And I think it's probably the best exclusive Switch game, at least in my opinion.
I think I would agree with you, or I think I would put like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom over it for me personally.
Cal, let me tell you, Breath of the Wild, not an exclusive Switch game.
Well,
it's a Wii U game.
It's practically a Switch exclusive game. I have seen people attempt to play Breath of the Wild on a Wii U. It's not a Wii U game.
It's a Wii U game. It's okay. So I have it, and I have played it on the Wii U, and the frame rate is like slightly less stable. The way that Breath of the Wild works is that it's synced, so that if it goes below a certain threshold, it'll try to like sync lock to the next like stable frame rate, which is 20. It gives you even frame delivery at 20 and gives you even frame delivery at 30. No need to go to the technical aspects of it, but basically if it starts dropping below 30, the game will just like hard lock to 20 instead.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that happens a little bit more often on the Wii U.
Okay, so
still works.
Barring that, my top two are probably Odyssey and Tears of the Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom is fair.
Tears of the Kingdom probably gets the bump for me, but I personally, at least in the scope of there being two games only that exist in it, I am a really big fan of the Breath of the Wild like shakeup for the series. I kind of am probably a little over it, or would like to see them have some kind of melding of styles moving forward, but Mario Odyssey is a simply astounding 3D platformer game. I've said it before on the podcast. 3D platforming may very well be my favorite genre of video games that exist. What about multiplats or other third-party stuff? For me, I think that's secretly where the Switch has ended up shining for me, because I did get to go back and play a lot of play and enjoy a lot of the Wii U games that I never got to play in their original form, like Mario Kart. Mario Kart 8, I have especially loved what they have done with it over time. Just like the amount of tracks, I believe there's over 90 tracks in the game now. If you have the DLC, just a truly astounding amount of content in that game.
Yeah, it's because the deluxe was like, hey, here's the game, and it comes with all the DLC already included, and then they gave you a ton of new DLC.
Doubled the amount of tracks in the game over the last like 3 years. Yeah. And then obviously getting like Mario 3D World together with Bowser's Fury. Bowser's Fury, low-key, maybe.
I love Bowser's Fury.
If it was a standalone game, it might edge out like Mario Odyssey for me or whatever. Or if it was like if I got to play a full game of Bowser's Fury, like if that was a full-size game, it would probably edge out Odyssey for me, like as my top game for the console. But it was really interesting to play that fun little extra experience and all that kind of stuff. But then the Switch is a perfect, for me, like indie game machine. It has no problem playing them, obviously. And then a lot of those games are a lot of indie games, like they may be roguelikes, or it's something like Stardew Valley where you can very easily play it in 20-minute chunks, all that kind of stuff. I play a lot of bite-sizable indie games. And for that, the Switch was perfect for that. Pick it up, play it for 30 minutes. I am done with the indie game for now. Put it back down. Every single iconic indie game that you can think of that has come out in the last 8 years, I have probably purchased it and played it a good amount on my Switch, and that's a vast majority of where my playtime is, outside of the Mario Kart, the Mario Kart, the Breath of the Wild, the Legend of Zeldas, the Marios, of the console. That is where my playtime has gone. It has been a great indie machine for me. What about you?
Yeah, it's funny because like where you say that this is where you think the Switch shines the most, this is where I think the Switch starts to falter. Which is interesting that we have like exact opposite opinions on this.
It's because you don't play indie games, and you also have already played all the Wii U games. So what else is there for you to play?
So that's the biggest problem that I have with the Switch games is because when we were trying to like put together an outline for this, I was like, okay, exclusive games for the Switch. All right, that's easy. Hyrule Warriors. Nope, that's a Wii U game. Yeah, Mario Kart 8. Yep. Nope, that's a Wii U game. Okay, Breath of the Wild. Nope, that's a Wii U game. And then I just have to keep going through things and be like, nope, not that, not that, not that, not that, because it was a game that already existed. And I purchased it again, oftentimes just because I was like, oh, well, it's on sale. I can get this portably, so on and so forth, whatever that might be. But like, as far as exclusive games on the Switch, I think Mario Odyssey is the only one that I truly like. And then going on to third-party stuff, I'm always thinking like, well, why would I get this on the Switch? Because my problem with indie games is that so many are 2D, and the Switch's D-pad is terrible. And yeah, you could use the Pro Controller, but even the D-pad on that isn't that great. So I don't know. I'd rather get it on the PS5. Like
I simply just play my 2D games with the analog stick, Murph.
Okay, now that's
always
weird.
Have, never haven't.
That's weird.
Yep.
Like
I never
2D platformers, 2D anything.
Yep. I have never used a console extensively where the D-pad was like the default input, and they are very like uncomfortable and feel unnatural for me to use. So
you know what? You know what the problem was?
Analog stick.
You started with the GameCube, and the GameCube has a trash D-pad.
Yeah, and almost so small. And also like no good console that I've ever played a lot of has had a good D-pad.
So we had a pretty great D-pad.
It had a pretty good D-pad. I didn't use it. I was a nunchuck gamer through and through. Come on.
I'm so disappointed in you. You never used like the classic controller with its nice chunky D-pad for 2D stuff?
We never owned one. We never owned a classic controller. That cost too much money, Murph.
Callahan, it's $20. Classic controllers for $20. They're a piece of plastic that plugs into the Wii remote.
I don't think you understand
maybe 30,
the economic condition I grew up in, Murph.
You know what? That's fair. But point being, indie games, I usually just will buy on other systems. You are correct. I don't buy a ton of indie games. I'm not a huge indie game gamer like you. But yeah. And then anything that's like more modern, same problem. Why the heck would I get this on the Switch when it just runs better on an Xbox or PlayStation 5?
And that's where a lot of like my decision making when what games I buy where kind of comes into it. Like, yeah, a lot of the games that I'm excited about, I know I'm going to be able to sink my teeth into, that kind of stuff, I end up buying on the PS5 these days. But when it's stuff that I know I'm a lot more likely to play on the go, or stuff I'm not going to choose to play over whatever big game I'm playing on the PS5 or whatever, but I still want to play and interact with and stuff, I'll buy it on the Switch. It's kind of like a context dependent thing for me now. Like these days, the games I buy on the Switch, sans the Nintendo stuff, are the games I know I'm going to want to play on the go.
Yeah.
And so if you don't play the Switch on the go, why would you ever buy anything on the Switch anymore unless you absolutely have to?
Yeah, I suppose so. But yeah, there are some like good ports that I think are just best on the Switch. Like I think the Bayonetta games are probably best on Switch. You get 1 and 2. It's the only place that you can play 3. I haven't played 3, but I hear it has performance problems, and so I'm kind of waiting for the Switch 2 to come out, and then I'll start playing these things on the Switch 2. Yeah.
A little more thing. Do you buy your Switch games physically?
No. So I buy every single one of my Switch games digitally, which that's just kind of how I function for handheld stuff. Again, because I really wanted this to be an actual handheld device. I didn't want to be like, hey, well, I'm going somewhere. Wait, let me pick out which cartridges I'm taking with me. Like, let me pick out what game or games I want to play before I leave. I just want to take the thing with me and then decide how I'm feeling when I want to play it. Right? So having that be digital makes that so much easier. I mean, with a DS and 3DS, I guess 3DS only, because I still use physical cartridges for DS. But for 3DS, like, I have a completely modded 3DS. Everything's digital. I use a PSP Go. Don't use the UMDs. I just love the versatility of all digital. So the only physical Switch game I own is Super Mario 3D All-Stars. which I bought because Nintendo was like, hey, we're going to put this out there and then we are never going to make it available again. And so I took the baits. I bought it twice. I bought it once digital. I bought it once physical. Like, Nintendo got me. What they were hoping people would do, I did. So, but at the same time, a brand new copy is like over $100 now. So really, who's the sucker?
Who's you? What?
So I just have a brand new copy of Super Mario 3D World just sitting chilling. But I have never, ever inserted a Switch cartridge into my Switch.
Wow, that's
crazy,
impressive.
Right?
That's impressive. I'm on the kind of not the other end of the spectrum, but like I have bought a lot of physical Switch games. I probably have like 20 of them or so. And I also have obviously a ton of digital stuff. Like I said, I buy a ton of indie games. Obviously, those are all digital. But especially early on in the life cycle of the Switch, when I was like a poor college student and like micro SD cards were a little more expensive than they are now. Whenever the decision came up of like, well, I could buy like a bigger SD card or I could buy another video game. My decision making like pretty much always went to like buy another video game. So,
dude, it's crazy because like when the Switch came out, they were like, yeah, we can have micro SD cards up to like 2 terabytes. And I was sitting there thinking like, wait, that exists? Turns out no. At launch, I believe it was 256 gigabytes was the largest in 2017 that you could get. And that was not cheap. That was pretty expensive.
It was not. Yeah. It's
but
like
now a 256 micro SD card.
Oh, dirt cheap.
Like $40, $50.
Yep. Which is like still a decent chunk of change. You could still buy a video game with that instead if you wanted, but that's so much cheaper than it used to be. But I have had the exact same 128, no, smaller than that. It's 128 now, but I had the exact same like whatever 64 gig micro SD card in my Switch for a very long time. It is something that I had like incidentally ended up with for my 3DS, my new 3DS XL. And when I got the Switch, I was like, well, this is oversized for my new 3DS XL. I'll swap it over to the Switch. And so I just had it. And then eventually I got an 128 one. But early on, like I bought Breath of the Wild, like physically, and I had Mario Kart physically because I got it with the Switch that I bought used from someone else, that kind of thing. And then I think it was Smash that I bought digitally.
Because like, I always want to have access to that.
Yeah. Well, and I like didn't want to go out and get it, physically. I like pre-ordered it on my Switch and it downloaded day one and I was really excited about it. And then it took up like a third of the space on my Switch.
It's a large game. There's so much stuff in that. Yeah.
For a Switch, it's a large game. And so for a very long time, I then was like, okay, I'm buying my AAA games physical because I'm not buying a larger SD card right now. And I can't hold more than 2 AAA games on my SD card. So a lot of my AAA games, I've got Skyrim, pretty much all the Nintendo games that I own, I have physically rather than digitally, or I have them both.
A little double dip in there.
Yeah, but these days, it's very much like I buy them. I buy whatever version is the cheapest way for me to get a game I want if both versions exist. These days,
that makes a lot of sense.
If I end up with a physical game, it's because a game I had my eye on for a long time went on sale at Best Buy for $20 or whatever randomly in the middle of a Tuesday. And so bought it, get it shipped to my house. I have it for $20 instead of $40, that kind of thing. But it is slightly annoying to always have to keep track of my cartridges. Or like there's been multiple times when I've gotten on a flight, have the Switch in my bag, and then I open up my Switch and it has Tears of the Kingdom in it, but I was really just actually wanting to play some good old comfort gaming Skyrim. Check out our comfort gaming episode for more about that. But my Skyrim cartridge is in my little, a folio of Switch cartridges. Cool. Dig around at the bottom of my backpack. Oh, it's not in my backpack. I took it out of my backpack where it almost always lives to switch out Skyrim for Tears of the Kingdom when I was playing Tears of the Kingdom on the TV, and I left it on the entertainment center and I didn't throw it back in my backpack. Oh, brother. That has happened to me enough times to put it on 2 hands, which is kind of
really
crazy. Yeah.
That's kind of. I thought this was like something that happened once, and you're like, that sucks, never again.
Well, and then it happens again like a calendar year later. just long enough for me to get lazy. But I do it both. I do wish I had more digital games, but
isn't that weird that I'm like, hey, I never use this thing digitally, but I treat it as if it were a digital console with all my purchases, and you're the exact opposite.
Yep. And I have fairly purposely bought in the collector mindset classic. I have purposely bought the Pokemon games that I wanted to play because I just enjoy having Pokemon games around. Just, it's a thing. And I did purposely buy both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to keep up my complete, except for nearly complete, mainline Legend of Zelda physical collection, which is
what are you missing?
I am missing the Minish Cap on the Game Boy Advance. That is the one I'm missing.
A little pricey now.
It's not cheap. It's not cheap, let me tell you. But otherwise, with the recent, not that recent anymore, purchase of Zelda 2. Anyways, it's another sneaky collection that I just happen to have.
Nice. But yes, I do agree that having some Switch stuff, if you do want to do at least some things physical, I definitely recommend getting the first party Nintendo stuff physical, because that just will hold its value a lot better than most. And honestly, overall, like Switch games, I think hold their value a lot better on average compared to like PS4 and Xbox.
Well, I think a big reason for it is that Nintendo never sells that stuff on sale. It's just like we have never gotten the Nintendo Selects of the generation. They never... I think maybe like the cheapest you maybe could have gotten Odyssey, a launch title on the Switch, or borderline close to it.
It was soon after, but not quite launch.
Like I think maybe the cheapest you ever could have gotten Odyssey is like for one Black Friday sale, someone might have sold it for $30 or whatever. Meanwhile, a lot of other games on the PS4, the PS5, 6 months later, the first big summer sale that comes around, new games will be $20. That's just not how Nintendo rolls anymore. It's kind of wild.
I did say at the top of this that I was very glad just overall to see Nintendo succeed. I suppose I'll amend that a little bit. I don't like how cocky Nintendo is
with their game pricing.
Yeah, they're like, we know that people will pay these prices, and so we are going to price them high and leave them there.
Yep.
And like, I kind of miss the Nintendo that was like, here's a game, and play it, please. This is like the only thing we have. Oh, you didn't play it? Here's Nintendo Selects. It's $20. It's a good game, please, I promise. And it is a good game.
I am very surprised that we never kind of got the Nintendo Selects or related of the Switch with, Breath of the Wild, Odyssey, probably not Mario Kart, because every Switch owner, it seems, owns Mario Kart. The pickup rate of Mario Kart on the console is insane.
It's insane. Which is so funny, because it's a Wii U game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which meant that no one played it, so now they have to.
Crazy.
Anyways, Murph, do you have any more kind of wrap up thoughts about the Switch? Anything else to note? Because we've been talking about the Switch for a long time.
Switch is a very interesting console to talk about. But yeah, I think the biggest issue that I have with the Switch is that it has an identity crisis. Looking back on it now that the Switch is... It's not a dead console, but its time in the spotlight is just about up. And looking back on it, my takeaway is that it is a jack of all trades and master of none. Like, it is not good at any one particular thing. Because, like, the first-party Nintendo games, I've already played half of them on the Wii U. And there are some legitimately good ones that are there, and that's why I have a Switch, so that I can play those ones. But I don't know, it's just not like it's not the best way to experience all these things. It's not the best way to experience all these third-party games. Oftentimes that's on more powerful hardware. And the Switch doesn't bring anything remotely close to unique enough to the table for like control aspects or anything that make it the definitive version. I think that Switch gets away with a lot of stuff under the guise of, yeah, but it's portable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yep. And that's just not a selling point for me in the slightest. And so it's very hard for me to look at the Switch and be like, yes, this library is truly amazing. That being said, I think if you don't have a video game console at all, and you're looking into getting into video games just in general, the Switch is a great place to start because that entry price is low. It's not that expensive a console, $200 to $300, depending on which version you want to get. I guess up to $350. And there are just so many games. And if you're just trying to get into gaming, who cares if it's the best looking? You're just trying to get a good gaming experience where you can get it. And technically, the Switch does provide that. There's performance issues, sure, whatever. Still has these games. You can still play them. And so I have a very complicated relationship with the Switch as a result. Because part of me says, I don't care about these games. I can play them better elsewhere or have already played them. But the other half of me is like, dang, what a great selection this system has. How is this not considered the greatest game system of all time?
Definitely. So I think I have a weird little thought here. Less about the Switch. Well, it is about the Switch. It's more, I'm interested to see where Nintendo goes next. Because yes, we know that the Switch 2 is going to be a better Switch. I'm very happy about a lot of things about that because I loved a great many things about the Switch. And from what I've seen of the Switch 2, it does seem to solve some of the problems I had, including it's just old, long in the tooth now. But I'm interested to see where Nintendo goes next because in a lot of ways, it feels like on the games front of things, it was like, in my mind, I call it like the age of maximalism for Nintendo, where it was like, here's Legend of Zelda, but now the world is huge. And then in Tears of the Kingdom, it's Breath of the Wild, but it's huger. And
now there's 3 levels of things: sky, underground, exactly. Regular.
It's a monumental amount of content. And here is Super Smash Bros. Don't come at me, people. I know there's tons of small differences in the gameplay that matter for people who are really into the game. It doesn't matter for me. Here is Smash Wii U, but we have added even more stuff to it. Just like I would be astounded if they could make a larger Smash than Smash Ultimate. Mario Kart 8, now that it has, I want to say 96 tracks in the game. So an astounding amount of DLC characters, even so much little weird stuff like all of the Mii costumes you can add to your Miis with the amiibo capabilities. You know, you unlock costumes for your Miis with that. An astounding amount of content. Unreal amounts of content in that game. There is probably never going to be a Mario Kart that is larger than Mario Kart 8 HD, or I forget the title of the
Deluxe. And that's because it has had 10 years plus to become what it is.
Hyrule Warriors. There is probably never going to be a Warriors game with more content than that game, like period. And
it can get you like 1,000 hours worth of entertainment trying to beat everything. Like you just can't beat that.
And even like the design of Mario Odyssey compared to many of the other games we've had in that series, rather than focusing on, like a very bespoke design for a level where you may go through it 8 separate times to get 8 separate shines or a certain amount of moons or what have you, for Galaxy, or, a couple different times to get a couple different stars in 64. In Odyssey, there is like 8 worlds or whatever. And in each of those 8 worlds, you can find 40 moons, 50 moons scattered everywhere, really easy ones, more challenging ones. But there is just stuff everywhere in that game. It's just like a very maximalist game. You're not fighting really hard for finding 6 shine sprites over 6 visits to the world. You are exploring every nook and cranny of a larger world to squeeze every last of these tons of moons they've hidden everywhere. Yes, there are other games that Nintendo made during this tenure that don't fall into that. The Mario and Luigi games, the Paper Mario games they made, some, all of that kind of different stuff. But I think because of the very unique situation where they were in, where they basically got to take a second dev cycle on so many of these Wii U games, or had these games release at launch that were so popular that they could release DLC in year 5 and that kind of stuff, and just add more and more and more to the game, like they did in the case of Smash and Mario Kart. I don't think, accidentally, almost Nintendo was able to make like these comically huge games full of so much stuff to the likes of which we'll probably never see for Nintendo again. So I'm interested to see what the next generation of Nintendo brings, like on the Switch 2. We have already seen like the hints of Mario Kart 9. There's no way Mario Kart 9 is going to be able to match up to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the content front. So what are they going to do?
Yeah.
Yes, not on launch. So what are they going to do? What's going to be the killer app about Mario Kart 9? What are they going to do differently here? And the same goes for almost all of their major, major
franchises.
Series. Yeah. So I'm interested to see where Nintendo goes after what I would call their maximalist era. This is something I've been meaning to write about for a while. It's been bouncing up and around in my head because it's very interesting to me to see where Nintendo will go next, because all of their games now are huge. They're not going to match that again. What happens next?
It's so interesting that you say that, because I think the failure of the Wii U is what caused all of this.
Definitely.
Is because not just like the size of the games, but the overall output that Nintendo was able to make on the Switch entirely depended on the fact that people did not play these games on the Wii U. So you can take Mario Kart 8, put it on the Switch, and all of a sudden, to a vast, vast majority of people, it's the new
Mario Kart
latest and greatest Mario Kart game. And so you just take that, cannibalize the Wii U library, and start putting it on the Switch. And like nowadays, I think like Xenoblade Chronicles X was like one of the last bastions of stuff from the Wii U that hadn't made it to Switch. Like they took everything from the Wii U.
It's pretty much just like the thing that always, like every Nintendo Direct, I was waiting for the shadow drop at the end of Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD, like combo pack or something, and that's never happened.
Yeah,
it's like the one remaining major thing that never came.
Yeah, and they will do something. Maybe not just straight ports of those to the Switch. Maybe they'll save it for the Switch too. Who's to say? But I think they will do something with it, because there's just too much that like people will pay money for remakes of Zelda games, and those Zelda games for sure. It's just too good of an idea to just leave on the Wii U. And I think that's kind of the case for the Switch's library as a whole. They were able to just take these games, use them to like make the Switch's library feel a lot more full than it actually was, either by re-releasing these games or by taking the games that already existed and just adding more content to it. And so, yeah, I do think that the Switch 2 will not be as successful as the first Switch, because it will not be able to have that aspect of things. Like, it will be able to play these older Switch games, so it will have that coming out of the gate of, like, it already has a huge install base. Like, it'll already have a huge amount of games for it to play. But I don't know if that's going to be enough for people to buy this and do it just as much, if not more so, than the current Switch.
Yep. Definitely agree. Well, Murph, I guess it's time for us to move on to our one recurring part of the show.
I noticed that you skipped right past the line that says Switch Online Service. TLDR, we collect old video games. We don't use a Switch Online Service, but it's cool for those that have it. All right, now we're moving on to...
I really wish it was better, man. It just pales. It pales in comparison to even like borderline like Xbox 360, PS3 era, Xbox Live, and PS Live. It's so bad.
Yeah, it's spotty. There's some that are really good, some that are not, and it's, I don't know. It's better than Virtual Console, I guess. I don't like subscription services just in general. I like having my stuff, even if I buy it in a digital form. I don't know, it just feels better. I buy the stuff I want, don't buy the stuff I don't want.
Yep.
So, yeah, Switch Online Service exists. Now we move on to our recent pickups.
Yep, it's time for the recent pickups. Murph, have you picked up anything recently?
Yes, I have. Okay, so I was going to say story time, but it's not much of a story time. Ninja Gaiden is a series that I love. On our Comfort Games episode, I was going to talk about Ninja Gaiden 2, but I ended up talking about Metal Gear Rising, just because I think it's a little bit easier to jump into. Ninja Gaiden 2 is just a very difficult game, and so it's not quite as much of a comfort game for me, but it is a game that I love. Like, I love this game. And so, if you aren't familiar with it, there's the original game that released on the 360, and then they made a PS3 port called Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, that scaled back a lot of the enemies, removed all the gore, and made a lot of other changes that some people haven't loved. I I'm fine with most of the changes, except removal of the gore sucks, and I think the pacing is a lot worse because the enemies have more health and stuff, and there's just fewer of them. It's just not as like ridiculously over the top insane like the original version is. Close, but not quite. So what happened was Koei Tecmo, out of the blue, a couple days ago, at the time of recording, just was like, hey, actually, here's a trailer for Ninja Gaiden 4. Oh, that wasn't enough? Also, here's Ninja Gaiden 2, a full ground-up remake called Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, made in Unreal Engine 5, and it's out now. You can go buy it now. And I was like, are you kidding me? That's insane. So, of course, me being a huge fan of Ninja Gaiden and 2 being one of my favorite games in the series, I picked it up and I played it. And this is coming from somebody who is a huge Ninja Gaiden fan and doesn't know like all the nitty-gritty specifics about everything. And the internet also isn't sure about everything because, again, the game has known to be in existence for all of 2 days. So what most people can tell is the gore is back and the enemy count is based off of the Sigma 2 version, but there's a few more enemies than that. Like they'll do something weird where it's like, say there's 4 enemies in the original game and then 2 enemies in the Sigma version. It'll give you 2 enemies. Then once you kill them, then another 2 enemies will spawn in. And it does that sometimes. And other times it just follows like the Sigma 2 enemy count just kind of normally. So some areas end up feeling a lot more empty as a result. But, oh boy, this game is still so fun. And I think it is absolutely incredible. I've been having a blast playing it. Do I like it better than the original? I don't think so. Because the original one has a lot of problems. And both Sigma 2 and this version, Black 2, do clean up a lot of those problems. But it makes the game feel a little bit more like the rough edges are sanded down. It's not like quite as raw of an experience, you know? So, I don't know. It's like, well, this game used to throw a bunch of like bull crap at you and you just had to deal with it. And these newer versions don't do that as much. And so it kind of loses a little bit of that charm. But anyway, awesome game. You should play Ninja Gaiden. That's all I have to say. Great series.
Yeah, it's definitely a series that I've wanted to jump into a little more since I was playing the first one on the Xbox, the first remake, you know, not the old stuff. But this series of games and this introduction of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black has me interested. If I get a little bit of like time budget in my life, then I think it is rising up the ranks of games I'm really interested in checking out.
It's only $50. Brand spanking new, $50.
There you go.
And I do think
60 or 70.
I do think that it is a good entry point because of the soft edges that have been kind of sanded down from the original release.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'd recommend if you have looked at the series from a like kind of outside and thought, that looks kind of neat, but I don't know if I should try it. Well, I think this game is the best chance for you to do so.
Simply try it. There you go.
Just try it out.
Well, my recent pickup, Murph, it is a lowly Indigo controller. I was in my local game store, and I've been meaning to pick up like another daily drivable-ish GameCube controller because some of my GameCube controllers have problems. A lot of them are now, a lot of my like special edition ones are now have a permanent home in my display case behind me, or at least really hard to get out, rather than being like extra grabbable options. So I saw this in the local game store the other day when I was popping in there, and I said, I'll pick that up. Secretly, I'm lying. It's also a special edition. Not actually a special edition. These were available at retail. You could just get an indigo and clear controller for the listeners. It has an indigo front and a clear back. It's just pretty cool. But these are a lot harder to come by than your indigo, your black, those kind of normal colored controllers. So saw a chance to pick up a cool GameCube controller that's not so special that I won't want to pick it up and use it day to day. So I went ahead and grabbed it. And so that's one more GameCube controller in the house.
So You didn't have enough GameCube controllers, so you thought, what if I got another GameCube controller? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, but I do mean it unironically.
How many GameCube controllers do you... Cal, you could turn around. How many GameCube controllers do you have in that case?
Enough daily drivable controllers.
I see. So none of the special edition ones.
I have like sub 4 usable like daily drivable ones that are in good shape, like tight sticks, everything works well. I do have a lot of like controllers that I've been meaning to like kind of almost zombie together. I have like 4 or 5 controllers that like, oh, that one's Z button is really sticky. I could probably open it up and clean it up real good and maybe it'll work better. That one's C stick stopped working 3 years ago. That one has a really wiggly control stick. They all have their own individual unique problems that just make them not exactly a like readily usable controller. So I was excited to pick up like daily driver number 4, and it also happened to be a controller type that I did not own yet.
That's neat. Have you thought about getting the Smash Ultimate ones?
I do have one Smash Ultimate one. They've gotten pricey, man.
Have they? Because you could buy them like brand new for like $40-$50.
That's pricey, Murph.
For a controller?
Let's
see. Dude, a Switch Pro controller is $70. That's not.
I know. I only have one of them. I only have one of them, Murph.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Controller for a reason.
Yeah, $70 is pricey, but a brand new controller.
If I'm willing to buy one from Japan, I can get one for $45, which ain't that bad. I would like to have more of those in the future, for sure. Just because
they have longer cords.
They have
which is really
the
nice.
9-foot cord on them rather than the 6-foot cord, which is, in hindsight, a necessity. That is the controller that I daily drive. If I am sitting down and playing, if I am sitting down and I am just playing the GameCube by myself, I do have a white Smash controller, which I use because number one, it is by far my newest one. I think it was manufactured in maybe like 2014.
Yeah, I think the white ones were.
Rather than 2004 or something, like probably most of my other controllers
10,
were
15
when they were
years
made.
or whatever. One other pickup, I suppose. I have one other pickup that is entirely related to this.
Sure.
I bought a GameCube controller extension cable.
Oh, yeah. I also picked up one of those recently.
Yeah. Like entirely related to this. But it was because I was playing through some Pokemon Blue. And so I wanted to play on the Game Boy Player because I have the nice GameCube Hori controller that has the really nice D-pad. It's like the big chunky D-pad, which is my preferred way to play Game Boy Advance games or just Game Boy games on the GameCube. And so I was playing it. I was like, this is just like a little bit too far away from the TV with my current setup. So I went online, found a GameCube controller extension, and it's nice and it works. That's really all I can say.
It's not hard to pick up the signal from a GameCube controller and put it somewhere else. They're really funny little pieces of. I have 1 or 2 of those kicking around, and I recently, again, when I popped into the store, I just saw like on the shelf they had some weird ancient third-party one that like wraps up around itself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I have one of those, and it was like priced at $4 or something. I was like, well, I gotta buy it.
Nice.
So I think those are our recent pickups, Smurf, and I think that's also everything we have to say about the Switch. So, we've been having this nice conversation. It's a little late for me, but I'm not quite ready to go to bed. So it sounds like I'm ready for some Switch bedtime. Happy gaming.
Wow. What great segues into our made up outro that you have. Thank you, Cal. Thanks everyone for listening / watching. Have a good night. Happy gaming.
Bye-bye.